So, after that recent Joe Rogan episode featuring Lindsay and Happer, it seems like a lot of people are feeling genuinely confused about what's actually true in climate science. How do you even start to untangle all these competing claims?
It's honestly overwhelming, isn't it? The first thing I try to do is check how what's being said stacks up against the overwhelming scientific consensus. I mean, there's a reason almost every expert organization worldwide says climate change is real, human-driven, and dangerous. It's not just one study or one group, it's decades of evidence from dozens of different fields, all pointing the same way.
It's wild, though, because Lindsay and Happer have such impressive academic backgrounds, but their views are way out there compared to that mainstream. Why do you think their arguments get so much attention when 99% of climate scientists agree on the basics?
Honestly, it's kind of the Galileo was right, so maybe these guys are too syndrome. The thing people miss is Galileo had actual evidence backing him up. With climate science, the consensus comes from mountains of data, not just authority. But controversial voices get clicks, and doubt always draws a crowd.
That actually reminds me of how they questioned whether consensus matters at all, saying true science should always be open to debate. But isn't consensus just a reflection of the best evidence available so far?
Exactly. Consensus in science isn't about stifling debate. It's about where the evidence naturally converges over time. It changes if new, better data comes along. But with climate, everything from physics experiments to real-world measurements keeps lining up. The basics haven't budged in over a century.
Let's dig into that CO2 is plant food, so more is better claim. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. Plants do need CO2 to grow. But is it really that simple?
Not even close. Sure, CO2 is part of photosynthesis, but plants evolved under pretty specific conditions. If you suddenly crank up CO2, you don't just get bigger carrots. There are all sorts of trade-offs. Water, nutrients, temperature, they all have to keep pace, or the system gets messy fast.
Yeah, and I read that when CO2 goes up too quickly, plants often can't adapt in time. Plus, things like protein and mineral content actually drop in major crops. So even if a wheat field looks greener, it could be less nutritious.
Exactly. Studies have shown protein drops by 5–15% in staple crops at higher CO2, and things like iron and zinc decline too. That's a big deal if you rely on rice or wheat for most of your calories. It's like saying, cake has flour, so eating more cake must be healthier. The story is way more complicated.
And then there's the whole issue of weeds and pests taking advantage, right? It's not just crops that benefit from more CO2.
Totally. Weeds often outcompete crops when CO2 rises, and warmer temps can mean more pests. Plus, changing rainfall patterns mess with any supposed benefits. So, yeah, CO2 is plant food is true in the most basic sense. But in the real world, it's much more of a headache than a help.
That bit where Lindsay dismissed half a degree of warming as just like, whatever, I feel that every morning really stuck with me. Why do scientists make such a big deal about what sound like small changes in global temperature?
I completely get why that seems weird. But a 1-degree change in global average temperature is massively different from feeling a breeze on your skin. It's like shifting the thermostat for the entire planet, even by a little, and that energy drives everything from sea level to storms.
So what you're saying is, while my local weather jumps around all the time, the global average is way more stable, and even a small nudge can mean huge impacts over time.
Exactly. During the last ice age, global temps were only 4–7 degrees Celsius cooler, and ice sheets covered half of North America. We're already more than a degree up from pre-industrial times, and the pace is way faster than anything ecosystems or people have dealt with before.
And I've heard that the oceans are storing heat at an insane rate, something like the energy of several Hiroshima bombs every second.
Yeah, it's wild. That heat isn't just invisible. It melts ice, fuels stronger storms, and pushes systems toward tipping points. So those tiny temperature bumps, they're anything but trivial on a planetary scale.
Switching gears, there's always talk that climate models have failed, or that they predicted things like an ice-free Arctic by 2013 that didn't happen. What's actually true about the accuracy of these models?
I love this question, because the track record is way better than most people realize. Exxon, way back in the 70 seconds and 80 seconds, actually predicted today's warming with shocking accuracy. And IPCC reports from decades ago have mostly nailed the overall trends, like Arctic sea ice loss, rising oceans, and general temperature shifts.
So when skeptics point to a missed prediction, it's usually cherry-picked or taken out of context.
Exactly. Models give ranges, not precise dates, and always include uncertainties. Plus, science constantly updates them as new data comes in. It's less about being perfect and more about getting the big picture right. And on that, models have been remarkably solid.
That's reassuring, honestly. It feels like people expect models to be crystal balls, but it sounds more like weather forecasting, good at the big trends, fuzzier on the details.
Totally. And when something doesn't quite match, scientists dig in to figure out why and improve the models. It's a living process, not a one-and-done prediction machine.
Here's one that always gets tossed around, claims that climate science is all about money and politics, and that researchers are chasing grants by following the narrative. How much does funding actually influence the science?
This argument drives me crazy, because it's almost upside down. The fossil fuel industry spends billions. Literally. Exxon and the Koch network have dumped mountains of cash into campaigns to create doubt. Meanwhile, climate research funding is peanuts in comparison, and most scientists would be thrilled with the salary of an oil exec for a year.
I guess it's easy to imagine some big conspiracy, but the incentives don't really line up if you look at who benefits. Like, if someone genuinely disproved human-caused climate change, they'd be world famous overnight.
Absolutely. You'd be a Nobel Prize contender for that. Scientists are actually celebrated for overturning old ideas when the evidence supports it. And climate science isn't just a US thing, it's global, with experts in China, Europe, everywhere, agreeing on the fundamentals.
And then there's the whole climategate thing. People love to bring it up, but didn't multiple investigations clear those scientists of any wrongdoing?
They did. The science held up, and the so-called scandal was basically manufactured outrage. When you actually look at where the money and incentives are, it's pretty clear. The push to delay action mostly benefits the fossil fuel industry, not scientists.
So with all that in mind, why do you think Linzen and Happer's arguments, even with their credentials, are considered fringe by mainstream climate scientists?
What surprises a lot of people is that expertise doesn't automatically mean you're right, especially outside your core specialty. Linzen's climate work is decades old. Happer's a physicist, but not a climate scientist, and neither has made major contributions to current climate research. It's a bit like an Olympic swimmer telling you how to run a marathon impressive, but not exactly their event.
And, honestly, science is set up so that if someone finds real evidence that overturns the consensus, the field will eventually shift, right?
Totally. That's how we got plate tectonics, quantum physics, you name it. But in climate, thousands of scientists across dozens of specialties keep coming back to the same answers. When the evidence all lines up, even outlier voices can't just wish it away.
So, bottom line, is it fair to say that healthy skepticism is good, but the kinds of claims we heard on that podcast have already been tested and found wanting by the scientific community?
That's exactly it. Science thrives on skepticism, but for a claim to stick, it needs real, robust evidence. What we heard was a lot of cherry-picked uncertainty and old arguments that don't hold up against the decades of data we have now.
All right, so we've dug through the big claims. Given what we know, it seems pretty clear the science is solid. What should we actually do with this knowledge moving forward?
Honestly, that's the real question. We've got the technology and resources. The main thing missing is the will to act. The more we get stuck debating settled facts, the more we delay solutions and inch closer to those climate tipping points that are much harder to reverse.
It's tough though. The conversation is so noisy, and doubt feels like the default. But the risks of waiting are only getting higher.
Totally. The costs of action are manageable compared to what we'd face if we just let things spiral. It's really about trusting the broad, evidence-backed consensus, not the loudest contrarian voice. The planet and future generations are counting on